Hello, everyone, and welcome to our show, MSL Insights. Today, we're going to be discussing COVID-19 scientific exchange with KOLs and the future impact of MSLs. My name is Samuel Dyer, and I'm the chairman of the board for the Medical Science Liaison Society. And for those on the line that don't know, the MSL Society is a 501c3 nonprofit organization and the only organization dedicated to advancing the global MSL profession by helping MSLs and managers become more effective in their careers. And certainly our show today is an example of that. So we accomplish this by offering numerous unique resources, including the first and only board certification for MSLs and MSL leaders. In simple terms, like any other certification, it allows experienced MSLs and managers to validate their skills and knowledge of the MSL profession based on a criteria determined by a large number of independent MSL and medical affairs leaders from some of the top pharmaceutical companies. If you want to know more about the MSL certification, the link is there on the screen. I'm also, before we get started, I just wanted to make it a quick announcement. I'm very excited to share and announce that we've just opened up the 2020 MSL of the Year Awards. This year, there's 8 categories, including MSL Rookie of the Year, MSL of the Year, and MSL Manager Rookie of the Year, as well as MSL Manager of the Year, with each having a U.S. and outside U.S. awards. This year, we'll have 12 highly experienced MSL leaders that will be serving as judges for all the submissions, and the awards are completely free to enter and also to win, and you do not need to be an MSL Society member to participate or win. We'll send a link to everyone, this link to everyone to learn more as well. That's the link to learn more, but we will send a link out to everyone. So for today, before we get started, I just want to go over a few quick technical details. As participants, you can hear us, but we can't hear you. However, in your control panel, you'll notice that you have a question panel. We encourage you to type your comments or questions into the question panel throughout the discussion, and we'll try to address as many relevant questions as possible during the show. We've also been asked by several people if this will be recorded. Yes, we are recording the show, and it will be available on the MSL Society website for everyone very soon. We just need a few days to put it together and get it up on the website. Finally, I just want to thank H1 for sponsoring and partnering with us for today's show. And that really brings us to today's show. We're going to talk again about COVID-19 scientific exchange with KOLs and the future impact of MSLs. For today's show, we've had around 500 MSLs and MSL managers and directors and DPs from various roles from over 40 countries register. So it's clearly an important topic. And based on numerous global surveys conducted by the MSL Society, there's a lot of concern regarding the future impact of MSLs and the future purpose of scientific exchange with KOL. So joining me today to discuss this important topic is Holly Schachner and Ariel Katz, CEO of H1, and Holly is just recently the Chief Medical Officer with Allergan. So Holly, Ariel, thank you very much for being with me here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Absolutely, I'm excited as well. So here's what I want to do. I want to start our show today with sharing the results of one question from a recent survey conducted by the MSL Society. We asked about 300 MSLs and managers. We asked the question, has the purpose of the MSL KOL scientific exchange changed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic? Interesting results. 59% of MSLs and managers said yes, the purpose has changed, while 41% said no. Holly, I'm going to start with you on this. Are you surprised by these results, and what is your reaction when you hear 59% of MSLs and managers said yes to this question?
Thanks, Samuel. I would say half of me was surprised by these results, and the other half of me was not. So I'll also give a shout out. Maybe the maize and blue. So the maize side of me was surprised. The blue side wasn't. I'm using a mug that starts with an M. So maybe for MSL Society or for Michigan.
Either one.
Either one, it works. And to be perfectly honest, some of it was a little sad to me, yet not surprising. And while I believe that COVID has changed a lot of things, the purpose of the MSLs should not have changed. Science from our company out to our thought leaders. That is, to me, the purpose of the MSL team. And that shouldn't have changed from COVID-19. How we may do that can change. So I do want to, recognize that I think maybe people either have not necessarily felt so clear as to what their purpose was, or did they read a little bit more into the question? Because I think a lot of people, as we're sitting here at the end of July 2020, going, of course, COVID has changed everything.
Yep. That's good. Yeah, I think that's some great points. Ariel, any thoughts on this? Ariel, you there?
Oops, sorry about that. I was on mute. Yeah, I agree with Holly. If you were to ask 100 MSLs in January, what is your purpose? I think the size of the company could change that answer, depending on where they're at. But also, it's you probably get a lot of different answers. So it's not super surprising. But I would like to learn out of those hundreds of people that did respond that it changed their purpose. What were they thinking when they did write that? Is it like it changed how they go about their job, or if it changed the content in which they're communicating? And so for me, it's super interesting, and would want to dive deeper into that topic.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. We didn't ask a further question on, and obviously we would have to establish more of, do we all agree on what the purpose is? And okay, if it has changed, what's the new purpose? Because I think what seems, and I agree with you, Holly, what is fundamental and has not changed, the success of any MSL working in any therapeutic area or disease state in any country around the world, the success of an MSL begins and ends at adding value to KOLs. And so if that has changed, if the purpose has changed, what is it now? Do you agree with that?
I absolutely would agree with you in terms of the fundamental purpose. The only other thing that I would add and say, perhaps some people have thought through this even more so and said, you know what, this is a great opportunity for us to add to the value that we bring.
Yeah.
And that, any type of situation like this really gives us the opportunity to do that. So I would love to hear if people were thinking about that and what else can we add to the fundamental purpose.
Yeah.
I do wonder if people thought about tactics. So for example, we work with thousands of MSLs globally, and they're doing they're engaging differently. And so maybe it could have been interpreted, are you engaging differently? Are MSLs and KOLs engaging differently? And I think the answer is yes, in a lot of ways. The medium's different, Zoom or phone calls or email instead of in person and coffee. So I do wonder in which ways it was interpreted as well.
Yep, absolutely. It leads me to really really want to talk about really our first topic here. And I was thinking about this, and it's a really good transition. And Holly, I'm going to start with you again first on this. And we're talking about this purpose change. So what, if anything, has truly changed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic as it relates to the purpose of scientific exchange with KOLs? And you've already alluded to that, but I just thought you could add a little more to that.
So thanks. And I think one of the things that was very exciting for me about being on this panel with Ariel is that, Ariel and I have met and have worked together in several different ways. And it's so funny and interesting how our paths have crossed on numerous times. And I think it's because we truly believe it in terms of a lot of the same things, in terms of the importance of understanding who the thought leaders are and who to gather insights from. So, as you know, H1 Insights, I've worked with them when I was at Allergan, because of what I had heard Ariel mention in terms of, I think when I first started, maybe, as I would often say, the pharmaceutical company of the 80s with my big hair and my big sunglasses, that's sort of gone to the wayside, but really to think about who are the international people that I want to get global insights from. Who's going to really help me from a national perspective, a regional perspective, a local perspective. But who those folks are have really changed over the years. It's really not just the person sitting in the academic ivory tower. It's the person who is on social media. It's the blogger. It's the person who is communicating the latest data from journals and other aspects that we read on LinkedIn. So those digital thought leaders, and H1 had really helped us to revamp a lot of that, because, and that's where I feel what might have changed, who we gather our insights from. But it goes back to the fundamental of bringing value to our thought leaders, whoever they may be, and that may change based upon therapeutic area, size of company, what country we're working in. But I think that who we consider our thought leaders, that might have changed, and how we connect with them might have changed. And we need to think about that.
Yep, excellent point.
I'm doubling down on what Holly said. It's so true. Like the type of leaders are changing, and then even the information on in the class, like a regional leader or a global leader or a national leader at Mass General or Cleveland Clinic or some large institution. The type of information you might need on them is different now. You definitely want to know if there's a COVID outbreak there, because they're not going to respond to you. So you want to lead with empathy. You probably don't even want to contact them. So you need to have details around that. You want to know if the hospital stated a policy around that. You want to understand, it's just like the depth of data questions that we're getting now, it's night and day, and we're all staring at a screen all day, everyone on this call and everyone. And so people have more time to think about additional questions, additional data that could help make their lives better, make their lives more efficient, and think of creative ways to get in contact with these people. Because we spoke about it before, access is a problem, and different types of leaders, the blogger, the doctor that's tweeting a lot now, posting a lot. Those are the types of people that we're getting a lot of requests for. I'm hearing a lot.
Yep. No, these are great points. And so I'm gonna circle back to both of you, and just be, I guess, very explicit and just a very simple yes or no, or maybe I guess going back to this sort of discussion topic. I mean, so all of that, I agree with everything you both said. I guess going back to this question, has anything truly changed as it relates to the purpose of that scientific exchange of KOLs? I think I already got the answer, but just being very direct, yes or no, or maybe Holly?
I don't believe the purpose has changed.
Yep.
I do believe how we may go about that and what we add in terms of beyond our original purpose, but I don't believe the purpose has changed.
Yep. Ariel, I agree with you. Holly?
Yeah, the purpose hasn't changed. The content we're hearing change from participation in decentralized clinical trials, open to that type of idea now. So some content has changed, but the purpose has not, obviously.
Yeah, delivery, vehicle, tactics, communication channels. Of course, all of that is going to change and pivot, but I agree with you. The purpose is not. I'm going to encourage everyone listening to. I see a lot of questions coming in. Continue with those questions. I guess the other thing that certainly has come up over the last certainly several months as a result of the COVID situation, is there's this transition to activities of MSLs and finding new ways to add value. For everybody on the call, just a reminder, if you haven't been on here in previous weeks, I'm going to read questions out loud to the panel for Holly and Ariel to respond. And what I do is I will only read and verbalize your first name, not your last name, but I just want to make sure everybody understands that their question is being asked. So I apologize ahead of time if I mispronounce anybody's first name, but I want to make sure that you understand I'm asking your question. So here's our first question from the audience. I think is a good transition because we're going to talk about impact here in a moment. Jean-Michel has said, or Jean-Michel, sorry, has asked, in considering the commercial teams have had a very limited access to doctors, are the MSLs expected to expand their role, especially for launch brands? Holly, I'm going to go with to you first on this. Any thoughts on that?
So, you know, I want to. I'm glad that you're going back to some other. You know, we've had this conversation. I think you guys have had as the MSL Society. I've had this conversation on multiple occasions. I've also done a podcast with other people speaking about like the business of medical and where does medical per se, including our MSLs, bring value to the company. Let me be really clear. There is no other function in a pharmaceutical company that has the purpose of bringing scientific exchange to the external world, to our thought leaders and physicians, as well as bringing those insights that we gather from them back to the company. That is squarely in the hands of the MSLs. And I personally believe, as we all work in healthcare, we work for patients, that is fundamentally one of the most important roles that we can serve. And I personally believe that that the MSL role should stick with that purpose. It doesn't mean that when we have conversations, that some of the conversations are going to lean into what our commercial colleagues may also view as important differentiators, but we are going to, I believe we should stick to it from a scientific medical perspective with the patient as our North Star. And if the commercial and sales organizations are having challenges, let's all sit down at the table to understand what the challenges are. But I believe the medical and MSL teams need to stick with their purpose because we're the only people who are able to do that. And it is so vitally important to a healthcare company to have this role and to have folks engaged in this type of activity.
Yep, excellent. Yeah, I agree. Ariel, any thoughts on this?
Repeat the question. I was engaged in Holly's answer. So, can you repeat the question from a second ago?
Yeah, absolutely. We're just talking about, you know, the change is, are we going to expect to see MSLs to get involved with more traditional commercial roles and especially as it relates to launch activities?
I haven't seen that happening. And we've been working with companies that have launched products through COVID. Over a dozen products we've helped launch. MSLs haven't changed at all. I don't think they will. I completely agree with Holly. Like the North Star is the patient, which is true for the commercial colleagues too. But
Right.
There's so much that the medical function handles that the commercial function doesn't. I don't see that shifting because of COVID.
Yeah, and I would also just add, I think especially during launch, there is nobody. We are the best experts. The MSLs are the best experts on the data for each
Yeah.
of the products. And I'd say even within a disease state, there are many different places that thought leaders and physicians can and providers can go to get that information. So they may go to their different advocacy groups or their external physician groups, their hospital groups, but nobody knows the data of their product better than the MSL. And that's what they need to bring to the table. And the commercial team brings their own expertise that we need to let the commercial teams do that better. I can't sell a product the way a powerful, an expert salesperson can, or I can't do the marketing. I sometimes think I can, but I really can't. And we should really focus on our expertise, especially at a time of launch. And there's nobody better that knows the science of the data internally than the MSL team. I don't care what company I've been at, that's the truth.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. So let's transition a little bit. By the way, I just got a question. This is not for the panel. Just I want to address this. Kayla has asked me, should there be slides progressing? I only see the title slide. So Kayla, if you're seeing a slide with my photo and Holly and Ariel's photo, that is correct. We're actually just doing Q&A. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, there will be very little slides. This is really about a discussion. So just wanted to address that and make sure there's no technical issues. So here's, I guess, if we could get out the metaphoric crystal ball for a moment. And Ariel, I'm going to go to you on this one first. How will the COVID-19 pandemic affect the future impact of MSLs from the companies that you've worked with prior to the pandemic to the ones that you guys are working with now? What are you seeing? What do you think is going to be, how is this pandemic going to affect the future impact?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I could talk about it. The purpose isn't going to change. I haven't seen anything like that. People are still hiring MSLs. They're still focused on communicating about the clinical efficacy, the data, the clinical data, the scientific data associated with the various disease area, the patient community, and the products that are being developed by companies. We haven't seen anything change about that. What we are seeing, and we do help companies like map KOLs or think about territories of MSLs or where they should be aligned, and that's completely changing, which is for large companies and small. So if someone used to think, oh, I got to hire an MSL in the Northeast because that's where a lot of KOLs are located, that MSL might be able to live in now Pennsylvania, whereas otherwise they need to live in Boston because everyone's on Zoom. And then the medium for communication is changing. And so even during COVID, people are shifting towards, they're getting away from this concept of geography, and everyone's, I think it would have happened anyways with this move to virtual, but this definitely accelerated it. It's in all industries, and particularly MSLs, where a lot of the job is to engage with people. So that's one component. Digital content, we're hearing a lot of. It's like, how do you develop content to communicate digitally with these leaders? And we're seeing a lot of change around that. And how do you communicate digitally effectively and share content digitally? We're seeing a lot of change in that respect, and we see that still happening. I'm trying to think what else is a big thing. Those are the big ones. I think it's, I see a lot of good coming out of this. I see a lot of like ease of access in terms of a KOL might be open to hopping on a Zoom call or MS Teams, whereas before they would have never heard of Zoom or MS Teams. And so I do see a big light at the end of the tunnel as we come out of COVID, whenever that does happen. And access, I do believe will increase, which is a big statement to make, but I really think that will happen because it'll be easier to engage with people.
And at least the new ways to add value. Absolutely. Holly, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Ariel, and I was thinking as he was and listening as he was answering. So, it's bringing value, but thinking about what are the different ways and what are the opportunities that are going to be open. And one of the things that I have seen as well is our ability to collaborate and to be the connectors for people, even within people's own hospital systems. The top thought leader in one therapeutic disease space may not necessarily even know the health economist in the academic center, or the in another therapeutic area, somebody who is very vocal on social media, and bringing them together digitally. It's so powerful, and you make these connections. And I think that that's a huge value that the MSLs can bring. Now, we have always been able to do that, although I know that at different companies, there's been like, no, we stick to one therapeutic area. Cardiologists don't want to be in the room with pulmonologists. MDs don't want to be in the room with NPs or CDEs. And I always said, I think that some of that's a bit silly. Forge ahead, that the good people who want to learn want to be in the room together and learn from each other. And this is a wonderful opportunity to get people together to do that. Again, same purpose, same value, but how you're doing it and looking at different opportunities and ways to do this. That's I get excited by this, and not that I get excited about COVID, but I do get excited. I feel like our snow globe has been shaken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's a fair statement. We should and can be excited about the opportunities that this presents. Now you just have to execute on it, but I think, as you both have pointed out, this just means that there may be some new ways to identify and uncover adding value, and I think that's a core theme that we need to keep in mind.
Samuel, I just want to mention, the one interesting thing is,
Yeah, please.
like with all the companies that we work with, from the big 10 to smaller pharma biotechs, we haven't really seen budget cuts either. We haven't experienced it. I'm sure there's one-off cases, but like to the MSL teams, we haven't seen any of that, which is amazing, and it shows the value that the MSLs are bringing to the organization and the industry as a whole. But I do think it's going to come out stronger because of that, and shows the value that organizations are seeing in that area. And so I do think if you stay constant through a crisis, then you just increase on top, or you come out on top. And so I see that's probably going to happen as we come out of COVID.
Yep. I think it's a great point. Yeah. Here's a comment from the audience, an audience member, more than a question, but maybe we could just quickly respond to it, because I think it's a great point. Georgia said, we must be careful of the MSL role and compliance. Recently, I learned a top manager was requesting to the MSL team to link the commercial team with KOLs due to Salesforce. Due to the Salesforce is struggling to get time for interactions. Holly, any comments or thoughts immediately on that?
Yeah, I say during difficult times, I applaud people for thinking differently.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we all know that there are some hard lines. I think that, as I said earlier, we can all sit down and have conversations to see what are some of the struggles and how can we work together. That's totally legit. And we should be able to open up our minds and be open to discussions and new ways of thinking, and not just say, well, we've always done it like this, and absolutely no, we can't do that. I don't like absolutes, and I don't like this is how we've always done it. However, we do know that there are some hard lines in terms of how we function. And that is not, if we stick to our true purpose of the MSLs, we we cannot be measured by prescriptions, by there are just true compliance lines, and people need to be comfortable saying no, or to say, I don't believe that that is in the best interest of our company. Why don't we all sit down together and get legal and regulatory and compliance in the room with medical and commercial and say, here's the situation, here's what we need, here's our objective, how can we accomplish it? Not can we, which is a yes, no, but how about how can we? And but I'm with, I don't know, it was George or Georgia who asked the question, and different companies are going to feel their needs and their pressure points differently. But I always encourage everybody to sit down at the table before we make assumptions. And there may be something that comes, I've also been in, you know, somebody has brought forth, this is what we're going to do, but it's not what was actually asked. So there's been some challenges with communication. So if something doesn't feel right to you, sit down and have the conversation with people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think great points. Ariel, any thoughts on that?
I completely agree with what Holly's saying, and it is a area of concern. A company working with both commercial and medical, we put in place firewalls, and we see the firewalls in place, but we also, it's a concern that we have too. But I agree with everything Holly said, and it should be top of mind, and people should feel comfortable saying no, knowing it's not right.
Yeah, I think we do need to maintain compliance and integrity, and certainly I think that is, you know, that credibility factor that MSLs and medical affairs bring to their KOLs and the interactions. But I agree with all of what you guys are saying, and I think fundamental to what MSLs can and should be doing is working cross-functionally and adding value internally. But I think this is probably over the line, and the long-term impact on that is going to be negative. So, George, great point. I want to transition to another topic here, and again, thinking about now short-term and the near future. Holly, I'm going to start with you on this. In the near future, given new potential strategic considerations, what additional functions can or should MSLs perform? So we're kind of talking about, okay, you know, there are some things that we can do, but thinking about strategic considerations, what are those additional functions that can or should MSLs be performing?
So great question, and I love the short-term, long-term, and strategic perspectives. Anybody who knows me that knows that's where I think, you know, how I begin my day, hopefully end my day as well, thinking about these things. And again, I think it starts with the purpose and the value of what the MSLs do, and, you know, from a healthcare company perspective, bringing in the insights, bringing out the insights, really being that the Gumby doll that goes in and out, and it's so important, and really clarifying what we need to do, and thinking about what is it that our company can do to bring value to our thought leaders. And, you know, a little bit going back to the other question, you know, if the commercial team, sometimes they feel their only value is on access or getting in there. Maybe that's not necessarily the case, but having the conversation, what is the value that the commercial team brings to the thought leaders? And how do we do that? And maybe right now, and I have friends who are in practice, that their biggest issue is, how am I going to make sure that my patients have access to speak to me, the physician, if they have questions, if they have concerns? I'm doing telehealth. You know, we really need to listen to our our customers, to our thought leaders, and say, what are some of the challenges that we can bring to you? I would even say, what value can we bring to you in terms of how to read a clinical trial? I was thinking that it's wonderful that we have amazing open data access right now. But as I was reading through and being a part of the COVID task force when I was at Allergan, there was data that was just coming out that wasn't peer reviewed. How do we properly peer review without that peer review? So how do we critically read data and understand it? Because there's a lot of data that's coming out now. I think that that's a strategic value that the MSLs can bring to their customers. Again, making connections, being that connector. I think that those are things for the very short term that actually also for the long term can really help both the companies as well as our customers. That's a win-win to me. And patients.
Yep. Excellent. Ariel, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So like our commercial colleagues, they're having bigger problems with access. So are we, but it's we're still getting it. Whereas it was mentioned on a question before, a comment, part of the question was like there's having more challenges with access. And so I think over the past 2 or 3 years, I've been hearing a lot about like MSL Insights, and we're seeing a greater importance placed on that because they're the only people talking to these people in the community now at these companies. And so ever more importance on insights and understanding, just having a voice for the customer, a voice for the community, the healthcare community. And so we're seeing a lot of that. And or to double down on something, I'd probably double down on that to be able to bring those key patient insights about like, are patients still going to the clinic because they're scared of getting COVID? Why are patients not getting their treatment? All those things the MSL could bring back to the organization. And we're with all the companies we work with, we're seeing an emphasis on that now as well.
Yeah, these are great points. And it's always interesting to me when we look at these types of things and we're trying to uncover ways to add value. One of the things that the MSL Society does over the last couple of years, we have trained MSL teams in something like 20 countries. We do a lot of training programs with MSLs, both virtual and live. Now, of course, with COVID, it's all been virtual. But I bring this up because it's always interesting and fascinating to me when we're talking to MSLs, especially new hire MSLs, people who are just getting out. But when there's a big dramatic shift, that the most simple, fundamental approach to KOLs is not present. And that is, and I think it's really elegant here in its simplicity, is are MSLs actually asking their KOLs, what do you value? What do you need? Right? Where's the empathy there when reaching out? And so, from my perspective, just what I've seen, I think it's a really valuable, simple approach. Holly, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, that I 100%. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Ariel, any thoughts, anything you want to add to that before I move on to the next?
Just you made this comment like 2 or 3 months ago, Samuel. Lead with empathy. It's true in a lot of respects. Continues to be.
Yep, absolutely. Got an interesting question from the audience, and if I didn't capture this correctly from this person who submitted this, please add more to it or clarify. But Floor, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, Floor, has asked, she's asked how to manage the virtual bombardment to HCPs. And I think it's kind of what we were just talking about a little bit, but any thoughts on that, Holly? We're talking about adding value and engaging, and we've kind of talked about access, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. It's a great question because absolutely, we've all been bombarded. We're all sitting at our screens, like Ariel said, all day long. So how do you really get the oomph? And I think it goes back to what you said, Samuel, in terms of empathy, but I also think it goes back to really knowing your thought leaders and also leading and thinking about the patient. So if you know your thought leaders and you ask them, what is it that I can do for you? How can I help you and your patients? Because they're struggling as well. I think that that is going to be the way that your communication, your virtual bombardment per se is really what will be what they're looking for, because we're all humans and we are going to go to where our needs are going to be met. So knowing the thought leaders, knowing what their needs are, and recognizing how you can deliver that, I think is key. And I'm going to take the risk of being a bit snarky per se, because I've been in the boardrooms many, many times, and I've been asked, well, what is the value of the MSLs? And, oh, so what? You get, 50 to 60 minutes with them. And that's more time than the salesperson. And we just want to measure, how many times you can get in. And I often cringe at some of those metrics. And I say the value is the access, that you want something, I know this person, I have this relationship, let me pick up the cell phone and ask them. And they're not going to charge me for it, and they're not going to shoo me out of the office. So the fact that the MSLs can have access to thought leaders and new thought leaders and thought leaders that we've had relationships with, and our commercial teams are struggling, it really talks about who is really bringing the value. And if we know what they need, if we ask what they need and we deliver that, that's going to get through all the digital noise.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Holly's right. That's so funny you asked that question. That's the question everyone's asking us too. That's the question we're in the discussions of. And the more information you have, the better. So if you know for a given HCP that they just spoke at a regional virtual conference, great way to connect with them. Or if you know that they can't see any patients because they're inundated with COVID patients, if they're not an academic center, they're in like a treatment center. Or if you know that they've started to see more patients that are not COVID, and they're starting to see the patients in their therapeutic area and atrial fibrillation or ophthalmology or whatever it is. So just having more information about these people allows you to just cut through a lot of the noise and knowing if they're going to these virtual conferences, starting to see patients and their life is getting back to normal. If they've just published recently, all that information allows you to be more tactical. And then developing content, it's like digital content around clinical trial activities of your company and making that an easy, digestible read way virtually. And so that's really what we've seen as be the most impactful to cut through the noise. And we hear that from MSLs that we work with too.
And I will also just add, personally, I get a lot of requests on LinkedIn, and there are a lot of folks, and I'm very fortunate that I have a wide network of folks. But at some point, you sometimes have to be a bit discerning as to, and I always question what's the underlying reason that somebody wants to connect with me. Well, if somebody sends me a note like, oh, I've listened to your podcast with Zypher and on your recent podcast around medical affairs, or
Holly, I think we lost you there. Ario, can you still hear me?
I hear you. I was nervous it was me. Holly, you might be.
I think Holly cut out there. Well, we can go on till she comes back on. RL, any other comments or thoughts on that?
No, be really personalized in the outreach, and to do that, do the research, have as much information as possible about them, and send them something really thoughtful to cut through the noise, and keep up to date by sending really thoughtful, informative things around the therapeutic area, what's happening in the community. And we've seen that really be able to cut through the noise and achieve the best outcomes with all the MSLs that we work with.
Yep. Excellent. We're getting close here on time, and I'm hoping Holly will be able to join us back again. It sounds like maybe she lost connection. Um, the other question that we had that came up, that is interesting, and maybe you could talk about it from working with other organizations and companies, is a question from an audience member. It says, what advice do you have? Sorry, and this was from Anna. Anna has asked, what advice do you have for new MSLs that do not have the network or have not had the opportunity to develop a relationship with KOLs? How do you suggest is the best way to get access to them? And I just thought that'd be a great way to talk about some technology and some of the cool stuff you guys have been doing.
Yeah, really, really, really great question. Because the people that work with us the most are the ones that don't have a network, the ones that know all the KOLs. They don't need us as much. It's the truth. Relate and show that you are a domain expertise that can be a credible counterpart. These KOLs look for someone that they learn from, view as credible, can communicate at a similar level to them. And if you display those characteristics by reading through their publications, knowing about their work, writing a question about their latest article and why they chose this methodology versus another methodology, they'll start to respect you and you'll start to be able to relate on a peer-to-peer basis, which is ultimately where you always want to get to. And so, and allow you to build relationships quicker if you start to add value and relate on a peer-to-peer basis. And so the advice that we would give is to really do your homework and use all the latest information. So if they published 2 months ago about the effects of COVID and individuals who are taking like immunosuppressant drugs in the given therapeutic area, read the article, write them a really thoughtful email about it, and you'll start to build up that credibility and that peer-to-peer relationship. And we see that working the best. That works great digitally because you could write a really long form email that they'll read. And so that's definitely the advice I would give.
Yep.
Hi guys, I'm back. I'm sorry.
No problem. We're glad you're here. Yeah, no problem. This is the reality. I love that actually that happened because this is the reality of A, doing it live, and B, doing it virtual. I mean, this happens. And so I think the one thing I always say to any good MSL is the ability to pivot and adapt to change. And man, we're going through a lot of adaptation needed and change anyway with the whole world we're working with, all the challenges. I was just asking Ariel, Holly, I don't know if you heard the question, but Anna has asked, and I'd love to get your feedback on it. What advice do you have for new MSLs that do not have the network or have not had the opportunity to develop a relationship with KOLs? And especially, I think that's very poignant right now. You got a new MSL just starting their career in this craziness, like, what am I doing? So, and she was asking, how do you suggest is the best way to get access to them and start building that network?
Yeah. So great question and a great answer by Ariel. I think understanding who they are. I would also utilize the tools, and Ariel might have talked about this, but even looking at LinkedIn and seeing the connections, utilizing MSL Society and seeing who may be in that area, the connections, the colleagues that thought leader may have published with. And again, you need to be a bit of a connector and a detective and finding out, and also ask, the other folks at your company. So I know that as CMO, I introduced several of our newer MSLs to thought leaders. I would always have them in as part of the conversations or the meetings that we would have. Certainly the ones that I knew well, it was very easy for me to make introductions. So you need to do some detective work in terms of who this person has published with, worked with, and who in your group has connections to them. And do not be afraid to ask.
Excellent point. Yeah. We got a question here that we don't need to spend time on the panel because we're running out of time, but I just wanted to address it because we've had a couple of similar questions. Tanika has asked, where can new MSLs for medical device companies, and really applicable to any, read compliance guidelines to ensure that we're working collaboratively but compliantly with commercial teams. Best piece of advice I would tell any MSL, and I know we got lots of questions on compliance. The MSL Society published the first ever global guidelines on MSL activities. We worked with pharma in the United States, a team of their lawyers for over a year. And we consulted with OIG to create that. That is available on the MSL Society website. It is open and available to the public. I would strongly encourage you to download that and look at that. It was developed by more than 40 MSL leaders globally, and we had over 1,000 MSLs during the open comment period look at that. So I would tell you that's a really great starting point. We got two more here, and I'm going to try to get them. We're running out of time, but I just thought these were important. Holly, I'm going to start with you. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, does executive management, and I thought this was great, being in your role and what you've been doing the last several years, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, does executive management need to adjust their expectation of the impact of MSLs?
So short answer, I would say no, as long as they always had the correct understanding of the impact of MSLs to gather insights and to communicate scientific data. That should be the same. The expectation in terms of how that gets done and the support that the executive folks give to MSLs, or honestly anybody in the field at this time, that may need to be adjusted. How one gets their work done. They should, I firmly believe good executives and a great leadership team should be asking folks out in the field or working remotely and doing their job, how can I best support you? How can we work? Is there anything that you need me to do differently? That's when you know you got great leaders.
Yep. Ariel, any thoughts on the companies you've seen?
Yes, the companies, we've seen 2 or 3 companies, and we love it too. No meeting Fridays. We're all burnt out from looking at these screens all day. And so we really liked that. We thought it was thoughtful. No internal meetings Fridays. Obviously, if you're meeting with the KOL, meet with them. But it was no internal meetings Fridays for their medical team at like 3 or 4 companies. And we thought that was great and really powerful.
Ariel, I did that before COVID.
Even more of a reason to do it during COVID. So no meeting Fridays.
Nice. Yeah. Awesome. So great suggestions. And I think this has been very, very valuable. We're getting close to the end. And I want to ask, and we can do this quickly. And Holly, I'm going to go to you first on this. What is one practical piece of advice or tip you would recommend based on any of the various topics that we've discussed today? Obviously, one of the things that we try to do with the show is give some very, very practical advice. So what's a quick practical tip or piece of advice that you would offer to the audience?
Well, I'm going to take it back to the patient. So before you have any type of engagement in person, on the phone, via Zoom, via the internet, I want you to go through your mind and say, if this person on the other end was taking care of my mother, father, sibling, me, a loved one, what's the information I want this person to know so that they could best take care of that patient? And that's how you go in and you engage.
Yep. Don't forget the primary purpose, right? Yeah. Keep that in mind, the end goal in mind. Ariel, any practical tips or advice?
Holly gave the best one. It's related to our mission, creating a healthier future for patients. The one, just given in the age of COVID, these people are engaging digitally. And there was a question earlier, how do you engage with these people? Engage with them digitally. There's so much going on in the world, from like social justice to public health. And people are sharing things now digitally compared to before it might have been at the water cooler. And so do that extra digging or find that information to engage and converse about a topic that that individual cares about, to build a real relationship with that individual. And so that's the practical advice I would give when an MSL's meeting with their next meeting with someone, the next healthcare professional.
Excellent. Yep. So, certainly, mine is, I would suggest that have an objective, have a clear objective when engaging with KOLs, with the value in mind, and execute on it. That's what I would suggest. Ariel, Holly, this was fantastic. We're out of time here, but I wanted to thank you very much for being here. I also want to acknowledge once again, thanks H1 for sponsoring and partnering with us for this event. I want to just point out also, we, as a result of this whole COVID-19, the engagements with KOLs and HCPs have obviously turned virtual. And so the MSL Society actually worked with H1 to conduct a survey to gain insights on how the current pandemic is impacting these KOL MSL engagements. So we're going to discuss all the questions of the survey that we did with 475 KOLs on what their preference is when engaging with MSLs. We're going to do that on Tuesday, August 11th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you tune into that. Registration link for that webinar will be sent out via email to everyone who is registered for today's event. Of course, we have our show next week. And we'll send out a link to that as well next week. And so with that, I'm going to, I want to wrap up today's show. And I want to, again, thank Ariel and Holly for being here. We really hope that you found this valuable. And as I mentioned, MSL Insights will be ongoing. We have a brief survey for everyone. We'd like for you to participate as soon as we end the webinar. But again, I want to thank everyone for being here, tuning in. By the way, people have asked about the guidelines. The link has just been sent out on the chat as well. With that, Holly, Ariel, excellent job. Thank you very much for being here and sharing your wisdom and insights.
My pleasure. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you to the MSL Society and to everybody who joined, and also to H1 Insights. Incredible company to work with.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Holly.
Bye.